Oh, yeah. What is happening? What is up, DegeNation fam? Are back. We are ready and we are grinding. It is the DegeNation podcast. Music to my ears. We're back at it, ready to do an early look. Draftkings pricing for week 1 on the slate. Football is back. Oh my goodness, it feels so good. I am your host, Ryan Alexander _W is where you can find me on Twitter. I am joined by my usual co-host, Mr. Kevin Steele at FantasyRad13 is where you can find him on Twitter. And we got a very special guest joining us. And it's not just for tonight. It's not just for next week. It's not just for a couple weeks. It is for the whole season. Mr. Matty Dickinson at Matty DFS is where you can find him on Twitter. Matty, we are having you on. And dude, we just had you on the last show, episode 77 for the Super Bowl podcast. And now you're back with us. It's such a treat, man. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to grind with you this season, man. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. It'll be nice to not be introduced as a guest anymore and be a co-host. Get that title back. You know what I'm saying? So good to be back, boy. Let's chop it up. Talk week one.
Yeah, we about to chop it up. Talk week 1 early. Probably the first man. It seems like forever since we've been able to play DFS, but luckily we're getting ready to get it. Man, training camps have been well underway. They're about to wrap up, and the season is going to be rolling forward. And that's music to our ears as we can, start establishing our bankrolls and get money flowing in from the NFL perspective. The DegeNation pod is back, guys. You know where you can find us: iTunes, Stitcher. You can go to the Fantasy Authority website and find us there. YouTube is where you can find the shows after we record them, put them out. You can always go back and listen to them there. And we're also on Periscope too. Thanks to StreamYard, we've been able to get on so many avenues. And we've been doing a lot of great things here at the Fantasy Authority. I mean, the mastermind behind the scenes, Mr. Kevin Steele, Fantasy Rat himself, ain't been playing no games in 2020. It's been a pandemic. It's been crisis mode all over the place, but not here at the TFA, man. We've been throwing out content thanks to him and Cody, who are co-hosts of the Fantasy Authority podcast. They've been doing some big things. They got a Patreon set up for you guys. They got the Slack channel booming and bumping. YouTube content has been coming out of the wazoo, out the ass, some might say. And Kev, why don't you talk to the people about what they can expect for the 2020 season? Because it's been quite a treat to watch and be a part of behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We've been grinding it out and, really trying to get into the YouTube content, the video game. That's the future of fantasy sports, in my opinion. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been pumping out as much YouTube content as we possibly can. Still do some written content over at thefantasyauthority.com. But for the most part, everything has been focused on audio and video, and this is going to be no different. The DFS DegeNation pod has crushed it for the last – this is actually our 4th season. I was thinking about it today. I was like, how long have we been doing this for? And I thought it was 3, and then I was like, no, it's actually been 4, because first year was us and then Elliot, and then we had Matty on, frequently, and then – Elliot went on to TQE, and then Matty took over as the co-host, and he went over to TQE, and now he's back. So yeah, we're gonna do a ton of good stuff with this. Every week we'll be putting out smaller videos for quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver, smaller breakdowns so people can consume it easier, and then we'll also have our typical roster construction build as well, and that'll be up. People can see that too. So you can go check out our Slack channel. The DFS Slack channel starts to get hyped around this time of the year, where we get a lot more content, a lot more conversation going over there. Absolutely free. So let's go, wheels up, and we're just gonna keep grinding it out, and we're gonna win some people some money, maybe a take down the Millie. So, and I can go straight in.
Somebody's got to win it.
Hashtag let's get this money, man. It's unbelievable. And DraftKings has had their pricing out for quite some time. So, as we get into this slate here for the first week, it's going to be crazy. There's a lot of exciting tournaments that are going on across all the DFS sites right now. The Millie Maker for week 1 on DraftKings, it looks like is going to be, they have a $5 Millie Maker and a $100 entry Millie Maker as well. So a lot of different, contests to get into. It'll be very interesting to see. We always talk about, being smart with your bankroll, managing that. So it'll be fun when we get into the deep dive to kind of see what different contests are out there and see what players can find themselves into for the newbies too, who are out there and just looking to get started. So how we do it here is we break down everything as it goes on DraftKings. That's pretty much where the three of us religiously play on. And it's a fun way to kind of break down the slate and break down the slates. But as we get into a deep dive here, we'll try and dabble into a little bit of what's going on at the other sites for those of you guys who play kind of across the board to kind of see. But as we talked about at the top, training camp's been going on. There's been a couple of injuries so far of note that could affect the week 1 slate. And as we get into it, let's kind of just talk about this slate and talk about the breakdowns here as we kind of have some real, it's week 1. So there's always some exciting games to kind of break down. We don't have to worry about the Chiefs being on the main slate. So we'll have to wait for you a week, Kev, to kind of play Pat Mahomes on the main slate. But we do got guys like Lamar Jackson, Drew Brees, Tom Brady in a new setting there in Tampa Bay. And some of these over-unders are approaching 50 right now. As we look at it, I'm looking at like the Seahawks-Falcons game, could have some fantasy goodness there. I mean, Ravens-Browns is going to be 48.5. I'm looking at Bucks and Saints in the Dome because no bubble for the NFL. So they're actually going to be playing still in these, favorable settings as we get, home and away splits that we can look at. So as we look at quarterbacks, guys, and DraftKings pricing, and Maddie, I'll kind of let you kind of kick it off. What are you seeing in the first look here as it relates to quarterback pricing? And me and you have talked a ton of times on this podcast just about, the opportunity that is had by not paying up so much for the quarterback position and kind of letting it fall to you, so to speak. So I'm curious to see where you're thinking as we got, Lamar Jackson at 8-1. And, for people who are just coming in and dabbling in at DFS for this year, especially with the way that things are kind of going and people are kind of updating their season-long leagues or maybe not playing as many season-long leagues and things like that, I feel like a lot of more people might come into the DFS mix. So how are you viewing the quarterback position as that is really the staple of your DFS lineup and how you kind of shape your team?
So I'm actually glad you brought that point up for this slate specifically. This is my first time really looking at pricing. And looking at the flex options, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that 7K or higher. I feel like usually we get more guys that cost more than that. Mm-hmm. So like just scrolling through some of these names, I mean, you've got like, for example, a Terry McLaurin is 5,600. You've got Miles Sanders at 6,300. So I think with some of these, high usage guys that are at kind of depressed pricing, you might be able to fit a Lamar Jackson on a week where you might normally we see 8-1 and we're like, I'm not paying that for a quarterback. But I think as we maybe talk through this slate, we may find a build, where you feel comfortable paying 8-1 for a quarterback. Just because, yes, there are guys who can maybe match Lamar's ceiling, but his floor ceiling combo, if you've got a build you like, man, it's hard to get away from Lamar, especially against Cleveland. You mentioned the injuries. They're already without their starting safety, and I think they had one of their cornerbacks, Greedy Williams. I think he came up, or he got hurt recently in practice too. So that Cleveland defense is going to be banged up already. So yeah.
How are you? Well, how are you guys handling it because of COVID-19 and because there's no preseason, and so normally we have some idea of how things look or what situation is a certain guy is going to be in or how this certain thing is going to play out. Like we're pretty much going into week 1 blind with only thing we really have is training camp information, and so I feel like that. Typically, you typically say, week 1 anyways, you should probably, not go all in, not, use your whole entire bankroll all in week 1. I feel like even more so this year is probably going to be that because I don't think we're really going to know all that much of what to really expect, how teams are going to look. We haven't seen a lot of these guys like Joe Burrow and a lot of these other teams with upgraded defenses and everything else. Like I just think there's a lot of unknown here in terms of what we compared to what we typically have, because usually we have so much information by now through training camp, through preseason, how everything's kind of shaping up. Or now we don't really have anything other than what we're getting from beat reporters, which there's not nearly as many beat reporters at camp as there typically is, where we're seeing all this stuff. So how is that affecting you guys, or how will that affect you guys in terms of week one?
So I'm just going to talk real quick, and it's not like this is just how I'm going to approach it, because sitting here acting like I know would be wrong. So, just obviously making an educated guess as to how things are going to shake out and how we can maybe use that to our advantage in the first week without really knowing anything. So I think offenses are going to have a leg up because defenses, they rely a lot on communication and trusting each other. Like I know if I'm playing nickel corner and I can leverage this guy to the inside, knowing I've got safety help over the top, like little things like that may not be up to speed right away. And then also the crowd noise isn't going to be a factor at all. So teams don't have to go into silent snap counts. So you're going to see guys like Aaron Rodgers who draw offsides all the time and get free plays, deep shots down the field. I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think you're going to see more of a reliance on committees at the running back position to start, because a lot of times we see running backs come in, Le'Veon Bell is a good example a couple of years ago. Zeke, he still got a lot of work when he came back from his holdout, but he wasn't nearly as efficient, but they kept feeding him volume anyways. But when running backs come in without a proper training camp or off season and whatnot, they still condition outside of camp. But if they don't have that football shape where they're taking hits regularly and have, game speed, they're not conditioned to handle a 25 to 30 carry workload that we see some of these studs like, Derrick Henry, Zeke, those guys handle. So I think it kind of caters to more so the pass catching running backs that their value goes up a little bit. Because I don't think in week one we're going to see a guy carry the ball 25 times. Maybe more so in the upper teens, around 20 to 21 as a ceiling for a high carry guy. But if the guys that catch passes, they can put themselves more on an even playing field with those guys who rely on high volume. So I think I'm going to lean more on the hybrid backs, like a Miles Sanders type. Or Alvin Kamara type. Those kind of guys are where I'm going to lean early in the season.
Yeah, Maddie, you touched on everything that I'm thinking of too. I mean, and really, Kev, to kind of just answer your question from the standpoint of like bankroll and how we're playing, I just want to be. I don't want to be heavy in too many large field tournaments as far as like entries go. Like, I just want to play a ton of like single entries, find the players that I like, or find something that I'm really keen on for this first week, and just enter that in single entry bullets like everywhere. Of course, I'm going to play, a $5 milli and some of these other things just to chase, just to dabble, because it's always fun. But I think really, especially if we start, seeing heavy chalk on particular players, in certain aspects that I think you can take advantage of. Like I'll enter in a ton of single entries, and even like I know there's a 33 single entry on Draftkings, 27 single entry on Draftkings. Some of those high dollars, but the payouts are a little bit bigger, and even the pricing from first to 100, it gets to be a little bit more promising instead of entering the milli with a $5 and maybe you cash like $10 on a lineup, but it's still in the top 10,000 or top 1,000 or whatever that would equate to. I haven't really looked at it close, but I know that some of those pricing payouts are just not that favorable. And I'm looking at the $5 entry right now, and there's a million entries that will be in there. Like, you have to be perfect. You have to be absolutely perfect in order to take that down. So I think playing in a lot of single entries will be fun. And even, we talk about this too, Kev, and I've dabbled into it in the later years of playing cash games. But even for this week 1, like I'm still kind of nervous to play cash unless something, crazy opened up, like Kenyon Drake's in a walking boot. So we get Chase Edmonds week, 4,400. Like, okay, then, I know I have a cash lock that I can probably put in there and feel comfortable with. But outside of that, like I'm not really comfortable at this point in playing cash. And even, let's talk about the pricing even, because usually you used to get like a cheap running back at minimum price, which would have been $3K. And now all of a sudden on DraftKings, as we do this first look, I'm looking at it and the minimum price was 4,400. So they've even made pricing on DraftKings, at least. I haven't checked FanDuel really too much, but it's even that much tougher because you're not getting, that cheap a salary with the defenses still being priced, $2K and above. They haven't really given us, a 1,500, 1,200 defense to start the year yet. So, yeah, man, I'm just trying to be smart with the money and really just kind of pinpoint plays, pinpoint tournaments that I want to be in, where I don't have to beat that much of the field.
I think the cash perspective of it is something I never even thought about because, well, let's be honest, we all know I don't play cash. But for the people that do, like that's got to be really tough as well. Like I don't even think I would even want to play cash because it just seems so. Week 1 is always an unknown, but this year it's even more of an unknown, and unlike anything we've ever seen. Because I don't know if anybody really knows what to expect week 1, how this is going to play out, how things are going to look, and so for me. Yeah, like I'm going to attempt. I say it every year that I'm going to play light week 1 and I'm not going to play a ton. And then I'm like, I put in some. And I'm like, okay, I reserve these set. And then Saturday comes, I'm building lineups. And I'm like, man, okay, I want to put in some more. I'm going to go over here. And next thing I know, I've put in as much as I maxed out my bankroll in week 1. I'm really going to try not to do that this year. It's not advised. Don't do it. Don't do what I do. But that's what I'm going to attempt to not do this year. But yeah, I just feel like that, especially for people that are just getting into DFS, because we always have the people who never play DFS, who never play NFL DFS, that typically play week 1. And like I think you can get turned off from it because a lot of times, you it's easy to get intrigued by seeing the Millie Maker at the $5 or some of these other huge tournaments that they have, the $3 that there's like 600,000 people in. Like avoid those. Stay the fuck out of those. Don't play that. Like go find the cheapest, like play the quarter jukebox or something like that and max enter that. Than do anything else because I think your goal should be trying to earn a profit because you're never. I'm sorry, you hitting your single bullet into the millie, you're not going to win. Okay, like if you want to do it for fun, do it for fun, whatever. But if you're trying to grind out a profit, stay the fuck out of those big tournaments. You're never going to win. Try to find the beginner level tournaments and stuff like that, or cash games, and stick to that for a while.
Yeah.
Kind of get your feet wet, learn what you're doing. Listen to the DFS DegeNation pod, and make money.
Absolutely, listen to the DFS DegeNation pod.
Let me also say that if people don't really rely on ownership projections like before a slate, week 1 is like the best week to leverage ownerships because of the uncertainty of what's going to happen. So like if you've got guys who are in possible committees, like let's say Jonathan Taylor 5,700 versus Jacksonville, who their defense is horrible. If he's going to be popular. Maybe they do start out with Marlon Mack to start the year. Right. And that's a spot you would not want to play Jonathan Taylor, despite, maybe you feel like he's going to be the lead guy. But there is uncertainty there, and we don't know, how that situation is going to break out. So if he's coming in as one of the top 5 owned running backs, it's a good spot. You want to get off of him, despite, you might be a little bit high on him for that week. And vice versa with using guys in situations or close, running back or wide receiver rooms that we know that they're going to get the bulk of the work. Like Miles Sanders, he's going to play 85-90% of the snaps. Boston Scott's not going to really take from him. And then like wide receivers, you got Julio and Calvin Ridley in Atlanta and not really much after that. So those are guys, that are, they're going to get their work. They're going to get their targets in their normal volume. So those are the situations, especially factoring in if they maybe could be lower owned than they should be. Those are the situations that you want to have, higher exposure to.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that too, Maddie. It's going to be interesting, and especially with just the state of how football is. I mean, we kind of avoided a scare, so to speak. I don't want to put it in those terms, but that's kind of what it felt like for me when they were doing the testing last weekend, and we had all these teams come out with false positives. The Jets had false positives. The Bears had 9, just all across the board. So it's going to be interesting when we get into, that first week of just like the testing and kind of what protocols are in place, and will a player be ruled out on the day of, a slate, an hour before lock, or, whatever, 3 hours before lock, and people will be, rushing. So I think, and one of the things too about it is, in most years, we've been able to kind of just, set our lineups, or people have been able to set their lineups. I know that we really, kind of dabble before lock all the way up before 12 Central, 1 Eastern. But I don't think you're going to be able to do that as much this year. Just set your lineups and forget it. You're going to need to be in tune to the news on a Sunday, on a Thursday, if you're playing the full weekend slate, before, kind of things are right. Even playing the Thursday, like that's going to be kind of even more so. You're going to want to be able to kind of pivot players. If you hit on players on Thursday, okay, so now who's the rest of your team going into Sunday? And do you need to make changes on that? You can't just set it and forget it, because there's going to be so many things, I feel like, that will factor into who's a good play, or will that player play, or what the situation is. We have no idea. And we're seeing it with baseball right now. Like, that's not in a bubble. Baseball is probably operating the closest to what the NFL will be doing, going from city to city to city. And we're seeing that things get, changed by the day with those guys and with those players. So you're going to have to be in tune. You can't just, if you're really going to be playing, you can't just, show up on the day of and think that you're going to make, a great lineup just because the players who are going out there are the players, if they're not on the injury report. There's so many other factors. So I just want to make sure that people are thinking about these type of things as we get into the season, because I think they're important. Kev, go ahead if you have something to say.
I was just going to say there's probably going to be some weeks where it's like NBA, you have to be at your computer before lock because of, all of a sudden, hey, Ezekiel Elliott's out this week with COVID or whatever. Like, it's going to happen. Like, there's going to be some weeks where all of a sudden we're 30 minutes to lock, and all of a sudden, boom, we got a couple guys that are out, and all of a sudden we're scrambling to make decisions.
Yeah, I wonder what the timing of, like, the testing is going to be, because they do, I assume they're doing everyday testing. So, like, on game days, are the 4 o'clock, the afternoon games, like, what time does their testing come in? Are they going to be getting results at 12:30 Eastern? And we've got 30 minutes to adjust for the 4 o'clock games. Are they going to come in after lock? Like, I guess it's, I haven't really looked into that to see what the scenario is for that. But, yeah, it could be pure chaos, and I love it.
I would guess my thought would probably be that I would assume they would do it like Saturday, I would assume, with both teams there, where you test everybody. Because I don't think you'd want to be doing it, Sunday where they're all in the field interacting and everything else.
Because I know MLB teams, they've, some of their games have been banged from day of testing, I think. So
yeah, I don't know how it's going to work, but it's going to be interesting to see how it play out.
Even more reason why in week 1 you kind of just want to make your couple lineups and just do it to have fun. Don't go crazy. Don't try and spike on the first week. If you do that, that's great. Like, if you hit the millie the first week, that's great. But you just got to be smart about things as we kind of see this evolve over.
I would definitely know how to mass edit a CSV file if you're going to mass edit. But you know how to quickly export and import that bad boy. Or
Absolutely.
Else, you can't get through hand changing anything over 10 teams. It's not fun to do.
Oh my goodness, not at all. Let's go back to quarterbacks, Mehdi. I know you kind of kicked it off there, kind of viewing the slate, but Kev, kind of talk to me about some of these quarterbacks that you're looking at for week 1 here. I mean, we got some interesting matchups. I mean, we got the Carson Wentz going against Washington. I know that we had talked in the chat, and you had kind of alluded to something where you wanted to, play this Arizona and San Fran game that's going to be on, the afternoon slate there with Kyler Murray and then or Jimmy Garoppolo, which is what your build was around. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that and see where you are. And then we got the Cam Newton in New England at 6,100, where he's in a new situation. The price is pretty favorable for him, at least on DraftKings. It feels like, and it's just a matter of who are you taking with him? Are you pairing him with N'Keal Harry? Are you playing a 6K James White with no Sony Michel? Are you going to, Mohamed Sanu is still there, Julian Edelman? Like, it just seems like one of those weird things with him. I'm appealed. I'm really wanting to take him because the price is so appealing, but I just don't know if I can find the stack at this point yet on this early look. But Kev, what are you looking at so far?
I don't know if I could play Cam Newton, to be honest with you, at 6,100, especially against Miami. Miami's really did a good job of upgrading their defense over this offseason. They have one of the better secondaries now, and especially in the division and, really in football with bringing in Byron Jones. And, they brought in Kyle Van Noy. I mean, they spent a lot of money on that defense this offseason. So that defense should be remarkably better than what it was last year. So I don't know if I would love that matchup. That feels like a really low-scoring 17-10 type of affair, starting out week one. But for me, I think it was pretty simple. Like when I first logged in and I started really looking at this, it's going to be really hard not to want to attack that Seattle-Atlanta game. It has one of the higher over-unders on the slates. I mean, Russ, please let Russ cook this season.
Mr. Unlimited.
Yeah. I would love it. But, I mean, being able to pair him with a Tyler Lockett or a DK Metcalf, run it back with a Julio or Calvin Ridley, I mean, seems really enticing. But I'm pretty sure that's what everybody's going to want to do as well, because that game is just, spells shootout. But for me, if it's not him, if I want to pay down a little bit, like I do like Jimmy Garoppolo. Like Arizona's defense last year was pretty bad. They actually gave up the most DK points to the position to quarterbacks last year. I don't think that defense is going to be much better. So for me, like I really like Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's such a an easy stack because outside of George Kittle, who has priced up, but at wide receiver they don't have Deebo Samuel. So right now we're waiting to see what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk. They say it's mild, and if it is, I love playing Brandon. I think Brandon Ayuk could end up being in line for 8 to 10 targets in that game, and he is super cheap in his own right. So I just think it's a really cheap stack at 5,800 to get him in. Yep. And so, like, I if you're wanting to paying down a quarterback, like that is right where that I would want to start, because everybody else around there, I think you have some questions. Like I think Derek Carr is also interesting at 5,900 going against Carolina. That Carolina defense is going to be so bad, and so if you want to play Derek Carr and pair him with Darren Waller or Brian Edwards or Henry Ruggs that a lot of people aren't that familiar with yet, that are just now getting back into fantasy football. And then you mentioned Carson Wentz going against Washington. Absolutely love that matchup as well at 6,300. Again, pair him if you want to with Zach Ertz or Jalen Reagor, Deshaun Jackson. Perfect spot. Washington's secondary is absolutely garbage. They went out and brought in Kendall Fuller, but Kendall Fuller was also garbage, and that's why Kansas City let him walk. And so I think these are all spots that I would be looking at. That's kind of when I first kind of tuned in that was right where I wanted to go.
Yeah, I think Carson Wentz for me at this point, if I was building a cash game lineup, he would probably be my favorable one. I mean, he's going against Washington. You kind of know where the ball is going to go without Alshon Jeffrey being there. You could take Zach Ertz at tight end, who's even priced down really at 5,800. It kind of feels too cheap for him as I'm looking at Mark Andrews at 6K, Kittle at 72, and we know how favorable he is. He's got the questionable tag. But it's all this stuff is questionable, like around what training camp is. So I'm kind of liking, taking players who we know are going to play and suit up if DraftKings doesn't fix these kind of Q tags and everything, because I think that kind of throws people off just from playing, daily fantasy for so long. Like people just get thrown off if they see any type of injury designation for these guys. Plus, and Maddie, you alluded it too with Miles Sanders. Like he's one of the quarterbacks that you can pair with the running back, and you can kind of get all of the points from the particular offense, I feel like, which is pretty favorable as well. So yeah, that's good there. I mean, yeah, Kev, you didn't mention Jimmy or you didn't mention Kittle with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's 7,200. Is that somebody who you feel like you need to play? Just even knowing that Arizona was the team last year
so bad
that we would attack tight ends against, and they really didn't do anything to shore up that situation of being able to guard the middle of the field so much. I don't feel like, they got the linebacker in the draft. And I think they tried to do some things to shore up the front seven, but as far as, stopping somebody like a Kittle would go, I don't know if they're really going to be able to, but paying up for tight end is not one that we always talk about so much, but it just seems like such a easy option to pay for him because you're getting a wide receiver at the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was me, I think that's what I would do. I would pair him with George Kittle, and then, like I said, probably run it with, if you wanted to, with a, like I said, a Brandon Ayuk. I think is certainly. I think Brandon Ayuk is like I said, like 4,400 or something like that I looked at. And then I mean, even if he doesn't play, then Kendrick Bourne is in play, and even if he doesn't, Kendrick Bourne is still in play because Deebo Samuel is likely not going to play. They lost Jalen Hurd. They brought in J.J. Nelson, and I think Tavon Austin. But I mean, those guys are nobody that I'm concerned with. So I think it would be a pretty clear path to touch it, or clear path to targets for a Brandon Ayuk if he's able to play. And and George Kittle is obviously going to eat no matter what. And then he gets the nut matchup going against the Arizona defense. So that's terrible against that. So yeah, I mean, I think, and it's like I said, it's a pretty cheap stack when you're considering Garoppolo's 5,800, Ayuk's 4,400, and then you can then easily play George Kittle and still be able to do a lot with the other positions.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking at some of these other guys here. I mean, how are we feeling about, a guy like Josh Allen going against this Jets defense that, they got rid of Adams through the offseason. They don't really have anybody else that I think, is really threatening, but it's another situation with Buffalo there where you're looking at a team that really likes to run the ball. They don't really, need to pass. And if this game isn't close, or if this game ends up being low scoring, he might not get a usable score. And you're looking at Josh Allen being the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th highest priced quarterback on this slate. He's around guys like Tom Brady on the road going against a New Orleans team where the points are going to be plentiful. Kyler Murray going against San Fran where the points should be plentiful. Aaron Rodgers is only 63. You got guys like Derek Carr, Gardner Minshew, Jimmy Garoppolo, all cheaper than him. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get to Allen at all on this first look, but it is just enticing to me just because he's got the Jets that he's playing against.
I just don't think the Jets are going to push him on the other side is the one.
That's fair.
There. They've got both Singletary and Moss who they can run, 15 to 20 times each if they really wanted to. And then Josh Allen.
Right.
It's just such a hard stack too.
Right. That's kind of more so what I was getting to is we don't really know how Stefon Diggs fits in. We don't really know, what the running back roulette is going to be for them at all. So
I do want to touch on Diggs real quick. So I was actually looking into the I did an article on the AFC East for line movement this week, and looking at Diggs over the last in 2017 and 2018, his ADOT was only like 8 yards one year and 10 yards the next. And then last year it was 15.1. So last year in Minnesota, he started to stretch the field a little bit more, and he was their deep guy. So I wonder if he actually, everybody, when you think of Stefon Diggs, you think of, quick hitter routes over the middle of the field, right? Because he's, he uses his quick feet to get open. He's one of the best route runners in the league. But, last year he was seeing an average depth of target of over 15 yards. And that's air yards per target. That's not including anything after the catch. So, they were working him down the field more. And so I wonder if he actually fits in with Josh Allen a little bit better than what the community, is giving him credit for.
Yeah, and pretty much everybody is shit on
Stefon Diggs. Everybody has said this is such a horrible matchup because Josh Allen is so inaccurate. And Josh Allen's inaccurate, but he's no less accurate than Cam Newton has been in his career. Cam Newton's got 7 out of his 10 seasons or whatever are under 60% completion percentage. And Allen went from 50% his rookie year to 59% last year. So that's right in line with Cam Newton, but yet everybody wants to love on Cam Newton now that he's a Patriot and talking about how good he was, like you can't call Josh Allen inaccurate and then turn around and say Cam Newton's the greatest thing you've ever seen. It doesn't work like that. So I personally think Diggs will be a great fit for if he continues to stretch the field like he did last year. because he is one of the best route runners, and Josh Allen doesn't need to throw him open because he will be open.
I know we don't know yet what's going to happen with Chicago, but that matchup's not terrible for Nick Foles or I guess Mr. Trubisky. I guess the last report I saw today was Nick Foles is just inches ahead of Mitchell Trubisky, and I've seen the Mitchell Trubisky has looked fantastic this offseason or through training camp stuff. But at 5,400, I think they're both 5,400. I think they're the cheapest quarterbacks you can get on the slate because I was looking at Tyrod, and Tyrod's actually 5,600. So I believe he is the cheapest on the slate, those two. And that's a pretty decent matchup going against the Detroit Lions, who don't have the best secondary, who got rid of Darius Slay. Yes, they spent their top 5 pick on a corner, but I wouldn't expect week 1 that this guy's going to come in and be a shutdown corner. So I don't know, like having a little bit of, if it's Nick Foles and Allen Robinson stack, like, I don't know. I think that could be a low owned stack that a lot of people aren't on. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, who knows? Mr. Trubisky could win it. And, I wouldn't be as excited about that, but I don't know. I mean, I know, Ryan, you are in Chicago, so I'm sure you've been much more closer to the situation. Does it sound like Mr. Trubisky's actually going to win this job, or is it going to be Nick Foles?
It's typical Chicago. It's too close to tell at this point. I mean, it outside of here, and even some people here, it's Nick Foles who's starting, but it's just laughable because you can't turn on sports radio or the news or Twitter and not see people just salivating over Mitchell Trubisky. All the training camp reports coming out are, Akeem Hicks wants to say something about him. Everybody on the defense, Khalil Mack, wants to say it doesn't matter who's back there. We're going to be balling. Nothing. There's no real traction that's getting on Nick Foles, which was very different than what had been happening pretty much from March until June or the start of July, which was basically, it was Nick Foles' job to lose because they brought everybody in to kind of cater to him. So I'm not sure, the Bears are turning into one of those teams where I don't want to say Matt Nagy's like Bruce Arians, where he says something and you just can't believe him all yet. But it is turning into that point where they're saying one thing for narrative speak for the public, and then they go off and do a totally different thing. Like all of this talk around Mitchell Trubisky could just be null and void to just say that, Nick Foles is going to be the starter and that's who we're planning for. And we don't want people to have to game plan against what we're going to be doing against Nick Foles with no preseason. This is a team that didn't want to play their starters in the preseason because they just wanted to save everything for the regular season and let everything be a secret. Okay, we saw how that turned out. So I don't know if we can really trust that situation, but them being the same price on DraftKings is just laughable. If Nick Foles is the starter, I mean, that's 100%, you play him and you kind of feel confident about that because, yeah, like you said, Kev, I mean, they have tight end roulette. We don't know who to trust there. Like David Montgomery, people are talking about him for redraft. I own shares of him. That's fine. But, Tariq Cohen could still be a play, and they're kind of similarly priced towards each other. So I think you're right. You would just take Nick Foles to Allen Robinson, who's the leaps and bounds number 1 wide receiver on the team, and just go with that and see what you can do. And it's going to be, you're not going to have that much of your salary being taken up. So you could jam in, other high-priced guys from around these other, explosive games and just hope that you can hit on something there with Nick Foles, throwing 3 touchdowns, 2 of them go to Allen Robinson. But another guy who I'm kind of looking at who really his options are kind of limited and has a questionable running back situation is Gardner Minshew. And Gardner Minshew comes in at only 5,800 on DraftKings for this slate. So he's pretty affordable there going against an Indy team, but has Phillip Rivers on the other side, who's, known to turn the ball over and known to put up points in a shootout or something. And this game, I think, is just it's kind of I think they priced it to where Jacoby Brissett would be on the other side of this game, and that's not the case. You have Phillip Rivers there on the other side. So I think this game has sneaky shootout potential, and you're looking at a guy like Gardner Minshew, and even with the guys like Dede Westbrook, Keelan Cole, some of these other guys there, I want to stack him with DJ Chark. Like their tight end just got hurt, it sounds like, from training camp reports that I was looking at. And so Chark at 6,300, he just seems like he's going to be lost in the shuffle there. You pair him with a Gardner Minshew at 5,800, and then I'm just logging out. And I don't even know if you really need to run it back on the other side from Indy, because maybe Indy goes up, a couple scores and Gardner's forced to throw. But this is a guy, he was battling with Nick Foles last year for kind of playing time to see who would be the starter. And then when Nick Foles was hurt, this dude was throwing like 30 times a game. I mean, he was going out there and just throwing. He runs too, gets you points there. So I think at 5,800, he can definitely, find himself into a 20-point game easily, and you pair him with Chark, and I feel like that's definitely a favorable approach there. So I really like getting to that on some builds early on.
I think one good thing about Minshew as well is his underrated ability to get out of the pocket. I mean, he was top 5 in almost every rushing metric last year for quarterbacks. So he has a little bit of that rushing upside that we kind of look for in certain guys. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't hate that with Gardner Minshew, with being able to use him for that. I mean, he only played, I think, 14 games last year, and he was, like I said, he was top 3 or 4 in rushing yards.
14.
He was number 1, I think, in carries per game, or top 5 in carries per game. So yeah, I mean, I think that's another underrated aspect of Gardner Minshew's game that we should be looking at in terms of DFS.
Absolutely. I like the guy. I like the player. They got some fun things going on with him with the Bud Light sweepstakes that you could do if you draft him first in your drafts. He's kind of all in, bought into the fantasy type of hype. So I just love that type of stuff. So I'm looking at Gardner Minshew as kind of a cheap quarterback option to play. Let's talk about some of these other running backs here on the slate. As it gets really interesting as you kind of look. I really feel like mid-range running backs is kind of where I'm going to end up going. I don't want to say where you want to be, but where I want to end up going. You got Christian McCaffrey at the top at 10K. Dalvin Cook is the second highest option at 7.9, and there's still a lot of just drama circulating with Dalvin Cook that doesn't make me feel comfortable in doing anything with the guy right now as far as playing him in DFS, drafting him in redraft, or anything like that. But he's second price at 7,900, so you're saving a significant amount. And then Alvin Kamara, at 7,200, I feel like he could be interesting. We know that Drew Brees in the Dome is lights out. He always puts up numbers in the Dome. You're going against a Tampa Bay team that we've seen likes to stop the run in the past. That's kind of what they built their MO on last year, is that they were a pass funnel team and you didn't want to really take running backs against them. But Alvin Kamara, he's catching passes when it's with Drew Brees. So at 7,200, I think he can find himself into a usable score. He's banged up last year a little bit, and then kind of came into the fold there. And if you're not paying up for a guy like Michael Thomas in this game, who's 9K, which I think you should have shares of him if you're multi-entering, I think 7,200 Alvin Kamara, when you're just looking at the running back slate, and if you're not taking a 10K Christian McCaffrey because you can't fit him in, who's going to give you the next opportunity to give you a winnable score from the running back position? And I'm just looking at Alvin Kamara. He really stands out to me. From that pass catching ability, if you can take advantage of. A guy like Aaron Jones at 6,900, there's no options outside of Devontae Adams there in Green Bay. Like they're just a joke. And he's shown numerous times last year that he's got pass catching ability. He's 6,900. He's had big games against Minnesota. I think he's got like 4 touchdowns in the past 3 games that he's played against them. He had like a 150 game against them for 2 scores last year. It's a divisional matchup. I like Aaron Jones at that price tag as well. He's had some great scores with Aaron Rodgers. And then, outside of these guys, like Maddie, you touched on that, and you can continue to with Miles Sanders, at 6,300, he's just too cheap with being, the option there and being going to be utilized what we think as a lead back. And you're looking at it, and he's priced at the 10th, 11th guy on Draftkings pricing. It just really doesn't make sense when you're looking at guys around him with, Joe Mixon at 6,700 against the Chargers. Maybe you could talk me into that, but I'd still rather pay for Sanders. Kenyon Drake is banged up. Nick Chubb is 6,500 on the road against Baltimore. Even Chris Carson, 6,200, who I would like playing on a site like FanDuel, where you're not really needing to buy into the PPR noise. But even Chris Carson at 6,200 kind of makes some sense in that same game. And then you're getting into the likes of like James White, Fournette, Montgomery, Mostert. So I just think that Sanders just makes so much sense to kind of put in and build your teams around. What are you looking at here, Maddie, while you're looking at things? I mean, I'm scrolling down and I'm seeing like Le'Veon Bell at 5,600, he kind of gave me some merit of appeal just because I just don't know how the Jets, put up points in this game, I guess, in a 5,600 Le'Veon Bell. If you would have said that last year, people would have laughed you in the face. Like, this dude has traditionally been a 7K price running back on DraftKings and above. But I guess, just the mighty have fallen, and that's kind of where we're getting him there. But he's still getting pass catching opportunities from Sam Darnold, so he could pay off that price tag, I think, for sure on DraftKings. But I'm curious to see where you're at, Maddie, with this slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on most of the guys, that are even worth considering at first glance. I think Miles Sanders and Carson make a ton of sense at 62 and 6,300 for guys who are going to see a ton of volume. We know, it's the Seahawks brought in Carlos Hyde, but I mean, he's only going to handle a handful of touches, I'm sure. Rashad Penny's not back yet. He's on the PUP list. So, and you've got Carson, who saw 47 targets last year, which is shocking because I didn't know he saw that much. So, a guy who's going to see anywhere from, probably in the 3 to 4 target range, that's still usable on DraftKings. I mean, it's not a Christian McCaffrey type or Miles Sanders type usage, but I mean, even Sanders last year down the stretch, he was seeing 5 to 6 targets every game. So you're giving me a guy who's going to see 3 to 4 targets and still going to run the ball. Carson will probably be near the top in terms of rushing attempts in week 1. I know he's got a questionable tag listed next to his name, but it's not for injury purposes. I think he had a personal funeral or something.
He hasn't been to training camp yet. Like, he hasn't actually showed up yet. He's been dealing with stuff at home. I think that he's had some family members pass away, I think, if I remember correctly. So he hasn't actually been there. I know Pete Carroll had recently said that they expect him back soon. So that does give me some pause. Like, is he going to be ready to go for week 1? I know he still's got a little bit of time, and I know he knows his offense.
True.
Is he going to be in physical shape to be out there and getting that kind of touches? Because the guy that's really, I guess, has flashed in camp has been DJ Dallas, was the 4th-round pick out of Miami. And he is somebody that is also a capable pass catcher, but he is much more in line with kind of like a Chris Carson type body type. He's not like a satellite back at all. So do I think DJ Dallas has a role week 1? Probably not. But I would be concerned a little bit with Chris Carson and how much opportunity he gets week 1.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know he hadn't been there at all. From the way what I read, it made it seem like he was returning, as in he had left. But yeah, that's definitely a different scenario, and definitely one that you need to pay attention to, and definitely makes me question. Well, something we'll have to revisit on our week 1 when we take a deeper dive. But I think an interesting name isn't Swift banged up right now for the Lions?
Well, Kerryon Johnson he's been in a brace, and
yeah, but
he's been in and out of camp and getting opportunities. So there's been a lot of these guys that have suffered the soft tissue injuries because of it, But a lot of it you have to question because a lot of the coaches have said that if anything minor happens, they're pulling him because they don't want to risk anything of these guys getting hurt. Like Tyreek Hill, for example, he came up and pulled up lame, but they came afterwards and said it's a very mild injury that they're not worried about. Miles Sanders was the same thing, that they said afterwards that it was going to be a very mild situation. So I think some of these guys are being a little bit cautious in terms of how they're utilizing him.
True. I guess that I didn't really touch on Stafford, but I do like Stafford a lot. So I guess that just kind of would reaffirm my love for Stafford in the funnel of targets to Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay. But yeah, so I guess then, you got to try to find a way to pay up at running back. I really like the Kamara call. I don't think it's smart to rely on last year's defensive stats. So, everybody's going to see that big red number 1 in terms of points allowed to the running back position for Kamara, and they may not pay for him because of how good Tampa Bay was against the running back position last year. But I think, he's going to be a staple of their offense. He's going to catch a ton of passes. Doesn't really need to rely on a good rushing matchup for him to have a big game. So I think Kamara makes a ton of sense. Eckler in the same breath, he's going to see a lot of pass game work. We saw him last year for a glimpse to start the year without Melvin Gordon, and he was just racking up DK points left and right, 39, 24, 15, 29, 23, 6 and 28, and then Melvin came back. So I really do like Eckler. Cincinnati was a sieve last year, and they're dealing with some injuries on the defensive side of the ball as well. They didn't really make too many upgrades. So I think Eckler and Kamara make a ton of sense as pass-catching running backs if you're not paying all the way up for McCaffrey. But I think it all starts with Miles Sanders at 6,300 for me. And outside of that, if you want to get really weird, Kev, this is for you since you like to get weird. 4K, Jerick McKinnon is kind of interesting on a PPR site just because, when he's in, he's going to be used in the passing game because that's not really Coleman and Mostert's role. And Kev, you already went through, they are banged up for pass catchers. Their wide receiver group is pretty thin right now. So outside of Kittle, there's not really many other names there that, they kind of jump off the page at you. So if McKinnon, I know he's missed last couple of years with the knee injury, but if he's anything close to what he was before, he's an explosive back out of the backfield and a couple touches and can maybe house one from 30 yards out. Looking at a solid minimum price running back.
Yeah, he's been getting a lot of rave reviews so far through camp as well, and how good he's looked and everything. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's some other options. One, Damian Harris. He has been the talk of training camp for New England. He's only 4,300. We'll have to see what happens with Sony Michel because if Sony Michel's out, it's very realistic that Damian Harris could be walking into as the starter week 1 for the New England Patriots against the Miami Dolphins. So that's something we're going to have to monitor, obviously, over the next couple of weeks because now it started to look like Sony Michel wasn't going to play week 1, and then it was like, well, maybe he has a shot because if he doesn't play, you have Rex Burkhead. James White obviously is still the pass catching back, but I think Damian Harris could end up being at 4,300, could end up maybe being that guy who turns out to be the kind of the chalk play of week 1 if Sony Michel doesn't play because he's likely going to get that early down volume. Rex Burkhead will still get some opportunities as well, but I think Damian Harris could walk into a 15 carry role, 15 touch role, and Damian Harris is also a capable pass catcher as well. So right. Something more than what Sony Michel is. They spent that 3rd round pick on him last year. He never got to play. I think he had 4 touches or something all year. Played 12 snaps or whatever it was. So he never got an opportunity. And kind of people just kind of threw him out with the bathwater over the offseason. And then, as things happen with Sony Michel, who's always constantly hurt, has really started to creep up and it has really built a name for himself so far through training camp. Now it is training camp, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But at the same time, they don't really have any other options there in New England. You look at N'Keal Harry, Julian Edelman's still there, Mohamed Sanu, but in terms of running backs, it's a hodgepodge group of guys. So Lamar Miller, they signed, who is yet to practice either. I think he's somebody that probably gets cut, before the season starts. I don't think he ever even plays for that team. But, so Damian Harris at 4,300, I think is an interesting play, someone to monitor. And as we get closer, if Sony Michel's out, he's probably going to end up being pretty chalky. But for me, I think some guys, Josh Jacobs, I think, is super interesting at 6,800, below Aaron Jones. And, Carolina was absolutely horrific against the run last year. And newsflash, their defense is probably going to be just as bad, if not worse. It has to be worse. They lost Luke Kuechly. They lost multiple pieces along that defense. Yes, they spent a heavy amount of draft capital to fix that defense, but I'm telling you, these rookies are not going to be able to come in week 1. So this defense is going to be so bad. And Josh Jacobs, as we know, in games that are positive game skips for him, he was so much better in terms of whenever they were down. It was kind of like that Derrick Henry effect a little bit. I think he scored all of his touchdowns when they were leading. So, I like Josh Jacobs at 6,800. I think we know he's the workhorse. I think he gets more pass catching volume this year. I know some people are concerned because they've brought in the dust that is Theo Riddick, and they brought back Jalen Richard, and they drafted Lynn Bowden. So, but regardless of that, I think week 1, I think Josh Jacobs, you can almost guarantee he's probably going to get 20 touches in that game. He's going to get goal line opportunities against the defense that is bad as the Carolinas is. At 6,800, I'm about that life, and so I have no problem going there. I absolutely agree with Miles Sanders at 6,300. Absolutely love that, especially against Washington. I think you can do that. I think Todd Gurley's a little bit interesting at 6,100. Seattle's defense, especially up front, is awful. They lost Jadeveon Clowney. They didn't really do anything to fix it. They're probably going to have the worst pass rush in all of football this year. And so I think Todd Gurley at 6,100, I think he's, again, probably locked in for probably 20 touches in this game. He's on a 1-year contract. They're going to run his ass into the ground. They really have nothing to lose there. So, Todd Gurley at 6,100 with his upside, I think is a solid place that I would be looking to go. And then past that, there's not a lot of guys that really stand out to me. I mean, if DeAndre Swift ends up being the starter, but that is against Chicago. Chicago's defense is decent. I don't know how great or how much I would feel about doing something like that. And then past that, kind of scrolling down, at least right now, as things stand, there's not anybody that really stands out to me outside of maybe Damian Harris, who could be a play. You have Kenyon Drake's him being in a boot, which he said he's fine. I think Chase Edmonds at 4,400 is somewhere you could look. Justin Jackson at 4,400. Look, I think there's a shot that Justin Jackson ends up being a guy who gets 10 to 15 touches per game. If you look with Melvin Gordon gone, Melvin Gordon averaged about 17 touches per game. I know we all expect Austin Eckler to come in and kind of soak up all of this, but I don't think that's really going to be the case. And Anthony Lynn has done a lot of talking about Justin Jackson this offseason, saying that he's actually the key to this running this backfield, which was somewhat surprising for someone to say, considering he hasn't had many opportunities. But anytime Justin Jackson's been on the field, he's been productive. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he could be somebody at 4,400 if you're kind of looking to kind of pay up at some positions. If you're wanting to pay down, Justin Jackson could be a spot you could go to, especially against Cincinnati in a game that they should be able to win handedly.
What are you guys doing with the Buffalo backfield? Because Singletary's 54 and Moss is 4,400.
Yeah, that's another one. Zach Moss, certainly. I think he's going to end up being
against the Jets, a game they should win pretty easily.
Yeah, I think he gets plenty of opportunities. I think he's the early down guy. He gets the goal line work, and he's a better pass catcher than what.
Yeah,
Devin
that's what I was going
to
say. Moss had sneaky pass catching upside coming out of college.
Yeah, which kills me because I hated Zach Moss when he was coming out. Like, I shit all over the guy. It wasn't so much I hated him; it was I hated the hype that was surrounding him. Where there were certain people in the community that were talking about him like he is.
You hated him too, Kev. Don't lie.
That's what I just said. Like, I hated him because I hated the hype. Like, I felt like he should have been going. Like, he should have been like the 7th or 8th running back, and people were talking about him as being like a top 3 running back in this class. And I was like, okay, let's slow a roll, and it just kept getting hotter and hotter. So I'm just like, you know what? Like, and that's where I end up like. I couldn't do it, but now here we are, and I feel like you have to be fluid in this situation, and you have to adjust your opinion on players as we get more information. And to be honest with you, like, he is stealing the camp there in Buffalo. Devin Singletary just seems like he's cooked in that situation, but Devin Singletary is still being drafted well ahead in seasonal leagues ahead of Zach Moss, and it's ridiculous. Zach Moss is going in like the 11th round. Zach Moss should be going at this point probably in the 7th or 8th round, and he's not. But in terms of week 1, I think that's also a really sharp call on Zach Moss at his price.
Yeah, for sure, and I just think I'll have to end up avoiding their backfield altogether. I mean, I like having Zach Moss, I guess, exposure to, and high entry fields. If I'm mass entering, 20 max or 150 max, I'll have some exposure. But it's just I'll go somewhere else. I don't want to have to guess between him and Singletary this first week. I'll just let it kind of play out for me in this regard. But at the wide receiver position, we've talked about stacking our quarterbacks with our wide receivers. There's only a few quarterbacks I feel like you can ever play naked. Lamar Jackson would be one of them because of his running ability. I guess maybe Josh Allen would come into that fold in some regards, but I still think you'd want to have a pass catcher with him. So with the guys that we're taking, and Kevin, I think we've all alluded to it, of having exposure to the Seattle side. Like, at this first look, I'm trying to figure out ways to get Russ, Lockett, and Metcalf into lineups and just, figuring out what I can do from there, because you're thinking about a Seattle team. And if they're behind in this game, or even if they're not, and Carson's not getting going, like, the offensive options that Russell has outside of these two guys are like really non-existent from a pass catching standpoint. The tight ends are, not really appealing. I mean, these guys are both double-digit target hogs, and you're getting, you put Russ, Lockett, and Metcalf in, you're only utilizing about 19.3 of your salary. You still have $5K left per player for all the rest of your positions, and you could really get all of the Seattle points in this offense. Like Metcalf being 5,800 is ridiculous, and Tyler Lockett's only 6,500 to go along with that. And instead of guessing on who's really going to be the play, and we know, I can tell you right now that Metcalf on any builds that are in right now, this guy is 40% owned. At 5,800, he's 40% owned in a game that's expected to get near 50. So, I don't want to have to necessarily fade him. And so I'll take him and Lockett and just hope that I can get away with both of those guys and have a good day. I mean, guys like Calvin Ridley too at 61. I really like that price. He should be popular and expensive, or not popular, or not expensive, but he's going to be popular. I think Julio Jones at 7,700 makes a ton of sense in a game stack like that because you're trying to get all of the wide receiver points there, and I just really think that people will play Ridley over Julio because of the salary saving difference that you're going to get there. I'm looking at guys like OBJ. He's 5,900. Seems way too cheap. He's the same price as Landry. I just, going against Baltimore, I don't know. I mean, I think that OBJ needs to be priced higher than that. That's just my opinion. It's crazy to see him priced at the same as Landry. Kendrick Bourne, we talked about, he's 5K. If for some reason Ayuk is more hurt than he is I definitely want to get some exposure to him. Philly pass catchers, what are we doing? Jalen Reagor, Deshaun Jackson, 4,900. Outside of the tight ends, you have these guys. And then Greg Ward. Greg Ward's been getting hype. And I know he's down there on the list. He's 4,200. So that's
Jalen Reagor is ridiculously too low.
It's so low.
Like 43. He's chalk.
That feels like a free square.
Yeah, you can't build a cash lineup without him, I don't think.
Like you just start Reagor and Miles Sanders and get all the Philly points basically outside of Ertz.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Ertz, I mean that's the only way. Even if Ertz, ends up being the play, quote unquote, like at 4,300, this dude is going to pay off his price tag.
He's their wide receiver one.
He's going to pay off that price tag, and people will play Deshaun over him. Is the crazy thing at 4,900.
What about Bryan Edwards? Because I love some Bryan Edwards, and Tyrell Williams sounds like with his labrum injury that he's got, and we already kind of talked about that game and attacking the Panthers. He's super cheap. I think he's 4,200, and again, that's too cheap for me. And I feel like that the volume could definitely be there for him. And in this matchup, I don't know, that's just so cheap as well. Like I feel like really I'm gonna end up talking myself into a Raiders stack is what's gonna end up happening because I think Derek Carr is interesting, and like I said, Josh Jacobs, and then just get real wild with it and run Bryan Edwards or Henry Ruggs for that matter.
Yeah, they've just got a lot of bodies on that offense. Like not necessarily anybody, that's there to steal a lot of the targets, but it just feels like there's a lot of guys who are just going to eat into each other's volume. It's like you got Renfro in there who's definitely going to see targets. Tyrell Williams, if he plays, he's going to see targets. Ruggs, Edwards. They signed Jason Witten for whatever reason. Waller. I'm blanking on the other tight end's name behind Waller last year. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
I'm looking right now.
Not Witten. Where is he?
LV.
Moreau.
Moreau.
Yeah, Moreau. Yeah, so I'm like they'll go like sometimes they went 3 tight end sets last year. They just do weird stuff. So while I agree, Kev, I think it could be a spot where they definitely, you want to attack that Carolina defense. Man, it's just a lot of bodies, and they got Aguilar in there. I know he's trash, but I mean he's still there. And like they've talked about Aguilar in camp. So it's like I don't know what the snap share is going to look like among all these guys.
Right.
I would love to bet on the Edwards and Ruggs talent. I would. I feel
like at least for me, I think Edwards is a better fit for Derek Carr in terms of what because Derek Carr was great as a deep ball passer last year. He just is so reluctant to do it. I think he was like 34th in deep ball attempts last year, but I think he was like top 10 in deep ball completion percentage. But he just doesn't want. He just will not throw deep, and obviously that fits much better with Henry Ruggs. They've talked a lot about getting Henry Ruggs and playing him in the slot. Obviously, Henry Ruggs is a player that's going to open up that entire offense, somebody that they really didn't have. I know Tyrell Williams is much more of a deep threat, but Henry Ruggs' speed is next level. It's Tyreek Hill level type speed. And so I think that's another level that brings into this offense. But I feel like Bryan Edwards is a better fit for what Derek Carr likes to do. And so that's why I like Bryan Edwards so much. And I honestly think that Bryan Edwards could end up being, in terms of just like a season-long thing, I think Bryan Edwards could end up being the guy who scores the most fantasy points and be the number one in this offense because he is that good. Had he not got hurt pre-combine, I think he's somebody that would have went in the second round, not in the third. Like he is that talented of a player, and so and everything we've been hearing about him as a as all the hype that we've been hearing, I think is justified because I think he's actually that damn good. And so the Raiders got a steal in the third round, and I just feel like he's a better fit for this offense, and that's why I think that if I was want to project somebody who's going to lead this team in targets week 1, it would be Bryan Edwards.
I like that, Kev, at 4,200, and you're getting exposure to that game. I think I could see myself having some shares of him just to get exposure to that game. Outside of what would be obvious on the Carolina side.
You run it back with probably DJ Moore,
or
Christian McCaffrey, however you want to do it, because that would be such a cheap stack. I mean, you'd be able to easily get, CMC in that way.
Right. Or even if you want to, if you wanted to pay up for a Teddy Bridgewater, McCaffrey, Moore, run it back with Edwards stack, I could see myself maybe doing that too. I don't know. I don't know what kind of Teddy Bridgewater we're going to get at this point yet. I kind of want to see him. He's not in the Saints offense anymore. A lot of hype has been talked about Carolina, and I just want to see it first. I like Teddy. I like the bounce back he had. I mean, from going to Minnesota, having the injury, getting a revamped career. I support it, but I just need to see it first because the hype has been incredible. Incredible, Derek. The hype is incredible, but he will win somebody a milli. I know that he will win somebody a milli this year.
Ryan Fitzpatrick can win somebody a milli.
Hey,
Bridgewater definitely can.
Hey, and Ryan Fitzpatrick this week. I mean, Kev, you were the one talking about the Miami, offense, so to speak, or the Jets, offense, so to speak, going crazy in that division against the Patriots. The Patriots have no D right now. All their players are on the injured reserve from, being scared of COVID. So is Fitzpatrick going to do something this week 1?
Hey, I'm happy. I'm happy the Jets, get. We got to get off on a hot start. We got to run hot this year. The Jets. All right. I need you this year to outscore, and we can start week 1. Okay, just drop the hammer on the Patriots week 1. If you listen to a previous podcast, you know what we're talking about. But with my bet with Derek, so I need it.
I love it. Let's talk about tight end at first look, and then do a quick wrap on defense just to see what we're liking. I mean, tight end. Kittle's at the top. I don't think we need to discuss that. If you can fit him, you pay for him. If you're playing cash this week, I think you pay for him. I don't really see how you could talk me out of doing anything different. But for GPP plays, and Derek kind of alluded to it in the chat, but Hayden Hurst at 4,300 to get some exposure outside of the Atlanta wide receivers in this game, I think makes a ton of sense. I think Seattle was definitely at the bottom tier defending the tight end position last year. And so if we can, get some of that goodness here with a guy like Hayden Hurst, who, they got rid of Austin Hooper, brought this guy in, I think he's going to see the field a lot in pass catching situations. 4,300 just seems like a very fair price for him. I think he's going to be hard for me to get away from. I guess a guy like Mike Gesicki I could be interested in. I'm just on a first look here. We're not looking at the same Patriots defense. So I'm very curious who they're going to run out there as far as, their defensive backs go. But you got a Mike Gesicki at 4,500 who might go under the radar, I think, just because it is the Patriots and people not really thinking about what that defense is going to look like with all these guys sitting. But I think, he definitely has some appeal at his price tag. Outside of those two guys, I'm not really on anything in the cheap range, and maybe you guys could talk me into some of these other guys. I just don't really see anything. Maybe Chris Herndon, he's all the way down here at 3,300. If I needed salary relief and I could convince myself to take him, I would. But I'm probably going to end up with a lot of Gesicki, a lot of Hurst, and then maybe a Zach Ertz to get the Philly pass catchers with him and Rager and just call it a day. What are you guys seeing from the tight end position that you like?
Yeah, I love the Hurst call. Seattle runs zone near the top of the league in terms of percentage of zone plays. You look up Hooper's numbers last year, he was better against zone, and I think Hurst is going to plug right into the Hooper role. Hurst didn't really have the volume in Baltimore, but on a yards per route run basis, he basically matches Hooper almost to the 10th of a yard. So I think it's basically a plug and play for Hurst into Hooper's role, and you're getting basically Austin Hooper for 4,300 against the zone defense is how I'm looking at that. I really like the Hurst call. Like you said, it's really hard to get away from Kittle up at the top. Something funny I just saw, I was looking at the Ravens depth chart on ourlads.com because I was looking at, Miles Boykin at 4,100. It is very interesting at the wide receiver position considering he's their number 2 receiver. But they have Nick Boyle listed as the tight end 1 and Mark Andrews as tight end 2, which is funny. But it's probably just for, semantics. But anyways, I digress. I think a cheap tight end that is interesting is Irv Smith against the Packers. Obviously, they're without Diggs now. Irv was already playing 60% of the snaps last year, and it's his second year with the team. I think that he takes a step up this year, and 3,100, you can definitely do worse in a game. Green Bay can score. Minnesota, even if especially if Dalvin Cook's got something weird going on where they can't just rely on him and Kirk's got to air it out a little bit. With Diggs missing, there's a big hole. So I think Irv Smith makes some sense down there in that price tag.
I like that call a lot. Kyle Rudolph has been dead pretty much in the past couple of years, just going out there and just not really returning dividends on what he can provide as far as it comes to pass catching opportunities. So I really like that. If we can find some cheap tight end goodness, that would definitely help me in building some of these lineups, get some salary relief. Kev, what say you at the tight end position, or you hit on everything, you want to move it to defense?
No, I think I definitely agree on Kittle. I think Hunter Henry against Cincinnati, I think, is definitely in play. If you go look at Tyrod Taylor's time back in Buffalo, his favorite target was always the tight end, which at the time, now his name is escaping me.
Charles Clay?
Yeah, Charles Clay. I think Hunter Henry would be a sneaky play at 5,300, where people would rather pay down a little bit further or pay up instead of playing Hunter Henry. So I think Hunter Henry would be in play. Honestly, I think there's starting to be some brewing. So it's brewing a little bit on the surface, and I kind of talked about it super early, but I think it might very well be time for some Dan Arnold.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
No, I love it. The matchup just kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's not the greatest matchup, I will admit. But so Max Williams actually hasn't been at training camp. He's been dealing with some things, and all the reports are that Dan Arnold is in line to be the tight end 1 for the Arizona Cardinals. So as people have been listening to this podcast enough, know that this is a Dan Arnold pod. Well, except Ryan. Ryan is was on the other side of that debate. But yes, Dan Arnold will always be a fan favorite here. But like I've liked it all offseason. They didn't bring in any other tight end, in Arizona, which a lot of people expected them to go out and really bring somebody else in to kind of challenge this group. But now it looks like it's Dan Arnold's it's Dan Arnold's offense in terms of the pass. Now he is probably the number 4 guy, number 5 guy in targets. But I think in terms of the red zone, I think you can really look to see a lot of action down there as well. So this might not be the greatest matchup, but at 3,500, you don't need a ton from him to meet value. So I don't know. I'm always down with some Dan Arnold. So
yeah, and I mean, we already said that offenses are going to have a leg up on defenses to start the year, and if that's what we think, then we can, we think San Francisco may not be that nasty defense right off the bat. I mean, it's a good spot to attack them through the air while nobody else is going to do that.
Right.
Dan Arnold, Spike Week. Let's go.
Oh my God! on a first look, didn't even wait for the deep dive to roll it out.
That would be so 2020.
So 2020, just getting that play. You better be playing some Kyler Murray then with that Dan Arnold play. Stop talking about Jimmy G.
No, Jimmy G. No, it's Dan Arnold time. Let it happen. Let him cook. Let the man cook. Can I just have a Dan? Like I would love so much for Dan Arnold to be a tight end 1 in 2020. Oh man, let's go out on a bang.
I want to see your exposure numbers for week 1, Kev. I want to see them.
I'm gonna have some Dan Arnold now, okay?
I know it. I just want to see the exposure numbers. That's all. I love it. Let's look at defense as we close out this pod for the first look. And as I said Dolphins. At the top, what'd you say?
What'd you say, Dolphins. I was gonna say the same thing. I was 100% gonna. Yeah. What are they? 2K?
Okay. So we got Dolphins at 2K. I love just seeing Wash football team name at the bottom. It's just so funny. And I don't know, has that been the case? I swear that a couple of weeks ago when the first pricing was rolled out, I swear I saw Redskins. But Wash football team, it is what it is. It's so funny to see. But Dolphins are the minimum 2K, and as I was saying, 2K it seems to be still the minimum pricing at least for this first week that DraftKings is rolling out. We've seen times before that they've gone 1,200, 1,500, 1,700, but 2K is the minimum right now. You guys are talking about Dolphins. That's definitely interesting. I mean, I think you have to go cheap here because you're paying up 3,700 for the Bills. There's so much salary. There's just so much you could do with that salary other than paying 3,700 with the Bills. Now, if they go out there, defense is just one of those positions where, if your team gets a couple sacks to get an interception or a defensive touchdown, like you're still in the game because the points scored against it really doesn't matter if you're racking up these other peripheral points and sacks, interceptions, and defensive touchdowns. So you definitely want to look for teams that potentially could turn the ball over. I mean, a team that I was looking at in just first builds was Jacksonville. Jacksonville defense, they're definitely a shell of themselves with having got rid of all these players, but they're going against Phillip Rivers on the other side. And Phillip Rivers has shown us nothing other than he's going to turn the ball over because he's in DGAF mode every time he throws it. Now, he might not be throwing as much because he is in Indy. He is with guys who want to establish the run. They want to run the ball. So we might not see as much as DGAF Rivers as we're accustomed to. But if we do, and we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at 2,300, I think they could definitely pay off dividends there. So I like getting some exposure to them. Outside of that, some of these other cheap options, they're just going against teams where I just don't know what to expect from them. I'm not really seeing anything else. I mean, the only other thing that kind of appeals to me as far as under 3K is the Chargers defense at Cincinnati going against Joe Burrow, the rookie. Now, we don't know what to expect from Joe Burrow, but he is a rookie. It will be his first game. This Chargers defense, that's a tough defense to go against on your first NFL career start. These guys are going to be out there for blood. So at 2,800, I could really see them paying off that price tag there, which is them and the Jaguars is really all that I've looked to because I just try and fit a defense under 3K to see what I can do because it's just tough to pay up for. What are you guys thinking outside of the Dolphins, or is it just Dolphins and log out for both of you?
Is it weird that the Bengals are actually more expensive than the Chargers? Like the Bengals are 2,900 and the Chargers are 28. Like, what's going on here?
I know.
Tyrod's at QB.
I get that, but
that doesn't matter for me. But that's probably why the price.
But again, it's like that would make sense if this was Phillip Rivers on the other side, because we kind of seen what he was doing. I don't know. That's what I'm talking about with their algorithms here for the Slate One pricing. It's like, are you still pricing these things as they were from 2019 without situations changing over? Because that's what I would expect there from that. And Tyrod's not a guy that's going to go out there and he's not going to really wow you with fantasy numbers, but he's also not going to turn the ball over all too much. So I don't really get that.
Can we talk about Derek's comment in the chat? Since we've got love for Dolphins, he said the Pats are scoring 50. Does that mean that Kev just loses the bet because the Jets aren't going to score 50 points the whole year?
Hey, Lord have mercy.
Kev's losing the bet on week 1. Derek like that. He laughed.
Kev, you're in trouble.
Hey, I'm fine with it. Hey, I'm good. I'm confident with all my bets. I've made a lot of bets this offseason, and I'm printing money. Just pay me now, pay me later.
Time to go all in on the Dolphins D. Hold those Patriots down, boy.
Show the receipts in the Twitter DMs. Come on, Kev.
I got it all.
No regrets?
No regrets. Well, okay, some, but that's because I bet on Adam Gase, which is never a sound plan.
Oh Lord, we're gonna be doing Adam Gase gifts all through the season, man. Through the season. We should have made you change the avatar too. Matter of fact, that should.
It doesn't even happen yet. I gotta lose first.
I'm saying. I know. I'm saying. We're gonna see. Guys, any last thoughts before we wrap up this pod here on the slate at all?
It feels good. It feels good to be back. It feels good to be talking DFS, NFL DFS. It's been a fucking crazy 2020 so far, and I'm happy we'll be back. In a couple weeks we'll be back. We'll be doing a much more in-depth look at this slate than what we just did tonight. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for DFS. I'm excited for football to be back. I hope we get a full season, and I'm excited to win some money. And since it is 2020, that's why I went with the Jets, because everything can happen. Anything and everything can happen. So the Jets outscoring the Patriots this year. Hey, anything can happen, baby. Let's go.
Oh my gosh, Kev, too much. I know we're back when you're getting hyped up you're getting hyped up on shit for a week 1 early pricing look. Oh, just unbelievable. I love it. Hey guys, we're DegeNation Pod, DFS DegeNation Pod. You guys got to follow us on Twitter at DegeNation Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You see it in the bottom right hand corner there if you're watching on YouTube right now. Go check us out. You can find us on your podcast softwares. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher. You can listen to us on the website at thefantasyauthority.com, and go to thefantasyauthority.com, guys. You guys won't regret it, like Kevin is regretting taking his bets with the Jets. So much content is coming out right now, guys, leading up into the season. Anything that you guys need for your redraft, for your redrafts that are going to be starting up here in a week or so. They got dynasty content that is running out for you with new guys that have come onto the site. It's been really fun to watch all the things kind of blowing up. And again, at the top of the show, we mentioned the Patreon, guys. The Patreon is live. Go find the details there again at thefantasyauthority.com. You guys should be following the Fantasy Authority at fantasy or at FF_authority is where you can find us on Twitter. So a lot of good things that are happening for 2020 for this season. We hope that you guys continue to join us for the rest of 2020. We're happy to have Maddie as a show guest, as a show host, not a show guest anymore. I got that flipped in my head, but we're excited to have you as a host, not a guest for the 2020 season, guys. It's going to be fun. Come along with the ride with us. It's the DegeNation Pod. Signing off for Kevin Steele. Fantasy Rap 13 is where you can find him on Twitter. Maddie Dickinson at Maddie DFS, and myself, Ryan Alexander _W on Twitter. It's the DFS DegeNation Pod. We're back, And we'll catch you guys next week when we do a deep dive into the week 1 slate. Until then, we out.